Welcome back. You're watching The Globe on the SABC News Channel. Now, African government authorities and business leaders met in Cape Town last week to promote Africa as a destination for energy investment. The Africa Energy Week conference was held as the world gathered in Glasgow in Scotland for the COP26 climate change conference. Now, the Africa Energy Week aimed to unite African energy stakeholders with investors and international partners to drive industry growth and development. Delegates brought attention to the significant potential of renewable energy in Africa, with global players pushing for the transition to clean energy sources. Africa's renewable energy resources can be leveraged to drive socio-economic growth and address energy poverty. To discuss the Africa Energy Week conference and its outcomes and the future of energy, as well as COP26, we're now joined by NJ AYUK, who's the Executive Chairman of the Africa Energy Chamber. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. I see you smiling. Does that mean that you had a successful Africa Energy Week last week?
Better than anything we expected. We shut out all expectations. We were planning for 350 people. We hit more than 1,700 people in the city of Cape Town. 1,530 hotel rooms were booked by people coming from all over Africa into South Africa. Almost 180 speakers at the event. There could have been nothing more than we could have ever hoped for or dreamt for as what we saw in Cape Town. We saw the energy industry coming together for Africa and really pledging to drive Africa forward and do things. So I'm excited. I'm a little bit tired though, but I'm really excited.
All right. Tell us in broad terms, what would you say were the key outcomes?
Key outcomes were, number one, you had a pledge to make energy poverty history. You had a pledge for leaders and the oil and gas sector and renewable sector to work together. You had deals done on one African country on gas monetization to really drive it forward. You had other deals done to fast track development of oil fields to increase production so we can reduce prices around Nigeria, Congo, and also Angola. You had a consensus on how to move on Mozambique with the big, massive gas there. But this is one of the most beautiful things that could happen. We established at the end between the Germans, the Americans, the Norwegians, and many African leaders decided that we are going to engage into an African green dialogue, something similar to what you have like a Saudi Green Initiative, where we're going to have a green dialogue over the next year. And then in Cape Town, again, don't you forget that's the place for this to happen. We are going to have the African Green Summit in Cape Town and during the African Energy Week, and we're going to really drive a new future. That means that we are going to determine Africa's energy transition, but we are going to consult everybody. Those were big, and a lot of service contracts were signed for a lot of young people and oil industry players to really promote growth and create jobs. So I'm excited about the outcome.
When we say the word energy, I mean, it's pretty broad in its spectrum. Who were the main stakeholders at this gathering?
Let's start with banking. We had Afro-Exim Bank. We had the African Finance Corporation. We had the African Development Bank. We had Black and Fish. We had KFW. We had people from the IFC. We also had people from private banking institutions like the Kalal Group. We had Robert Pinkers, and we had a lot of banks like ABSA and Standard Bank and different international finance institutions. They were really big, and they really brought their clients in there. But also you saw oil and gas companies that were not allowed to come to COP. I've never seen something so crazy that at COP26, where you want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you don't want oil and gas companies there. We invited them because it's an African tradition. We're very inclusive. We had players in the coal industry, we invited them so that we can work on using technology to drive a clean coal. But something that has never happened in energy conferences, especially around Africa, we brought in the renewable sector. And there was a big participation from Germany where we saw people driving green hydrogen and blue hydrogen and gray hydrogen. That is something that we're going to really see develop, and a big discussion on key stakeholders around the Inga Dam in the Congo that could really drive up. But something nobody's heard of, women. Women played a big role in this conference. Women played a big role in shaping things because we contribute the fact that the African woman is still the last hired and the first fired. We had some people in Dubai who had a list of women, but it's not just enough to put people on women on a power list in Dubai. It's important to put women on the job because that is the base of the African family, the African women. So we made a big play on that, and I was really excited with that happening. So these key stakeholders had a massive role to play, and we changed the face of energy in Africa, which it included all of God's children working together to get energy for Africans.
All right, as you said, some of those God's children weren't allowed at COP26, the oil and gas companies. So how did you manage this conversation? Because it must have been a difficult one for them. On the one hand, everyone is pushing towards clean, green energies, and yet you've got this whole energy sector, oil and gas, that you're trying to work out of business.
Well, first of all, we're not against green energy or any kind of green. A good friend of mine in the United States, Ken McGee, told me there are many shades of green. So we welcome those shades of green that are good, but we have to be conscious of where African economies stand and where we stand in our development. 600 million people have no access to any kind of energy, and that's a problem. 600 million, no lights. They go to bed every day, get up every day, they have no lights. That means they have no decent shut-up lives. That is the basic reality. 900 million have no access to clean cooking. So they have to use biomass to cook, pollutes the air really badly, and that's not good. That's not good for us. So when you stand with that, in Africa, we're going to need an energy mix. But also, in spite of where we stand in our development, we have to embrace the world. We have to embrace with the technology and the science around climate change. Nobody loves the environment more than we do. And so that's why we must take climate change seriously. But we also have to ask for a just transition. It is very important. You can't tell Africa today to transition at the same pace, at the same way that Europe and North America would have to transition. We have to make sure that this transition is just, it's inclusive, and it's equitable. And gas as a transition fuel is going to be what drives us. For example, Nigeria is already driving a decade of gas. A lot of gas is going to be used around South Africa. We can't give up the gas out of Mozambique. That is going to go from zero to the third largest producers of gas. We got to stand up for these poor people all across Africa while protecting the environment. The environment is so important that we protect that, but we have to also embrace the many shades of green, as that wise prophet in California, Ken McGee, would say.
I spoke last week to one of the policy experts on climate for Oxfam, and I posed this question to her, this dilemma that we have as a continent. We have all these resources, and our journey is slightly different to developed nations. And so she said that, look, Africa can jump the steps that the developed nations did, so we can go straight from where we are to green and not have to transition. What's your response to that?
It's always easy to say you can leapfrog to the future, but you can't leapfrog to the future if you broke. The biggest problem about leapfrogging the future, as many people in developed countries say, is keeping up with the promises. The problem is that at the Kyoto, Africa was expected to get and in many emerging countries, about $100 billion every month, every year for climate mitigation. Those funds have not come. About $1.3 trillion, nobody's putting that. How are you going to leapfrog to the future when you don't have no money for the technologies that would happen? How are you going to leapfrog to the future when you can't even pay? We just had COVID. We couldn't leapfrog to the future. They spent almost $3 trillion to save the economies, and we are bankrupt. How do you tell someone that is bankrupt to leapfrog to the future? The problem we have here is that we cannot rely on aid. We would have to stand with our own self. You can't give up your natural resources at this time because somebody says just leapfrog the future. It's not like jumping. It's not like doing a bungee jump out of in Soweto. If you do that bungee jump in Soweto without a rope, you would die. So we don't want that to happen. So we think we are going to have to do this by ourselves. We have to use our natural resources and monetize it and use those natural resources to then leapfrog to the future, because you would have to pay for it yourself. The era where Africans have to sit and wait for someone else to give them aid and wait to beg and borrow money, it's over. We've tried that. It's not working. So let's do for ourselves what we expect others to do for us. That's why we drive free market, limited government. We also have to hold our governments accountable, be more transparent, cut corruption, reduce taxes, and ease ways for people to do business. That will drive us so many young people to leapfrog to the future and really do something better. We're not leapfrogging to the future when we see so many coup d'etats in Guinea, in Mali, in Sudan, and in Chad. That's not leapfrogging to the future. We have a lot of socio-economic issues we have to deal with, and climate change is one, but you don't give up your only cash cow because somebody else says so and because they want to save themselves.
All right, so you raise interesting points, but I guess in the end, the question now becomes, and you were saying that we need to do it ourselves. How much of a conversation is actually happening within Africa? Most of our resources get exported and we re-import refined products. We look at who's doing the explorations, who's doing the mining, and it is foreign companies. And if we're lucky, we get a share. So when you say we have to sort it out, how, when most of our sectors are actually foreign exporting or foreign owned?
You know, I was going to tell you to show up at African Energy Week in Cape Town next year, but that would be a delay. We have, to answer your question, we need to change. We need to have a paradigm shift on how we do this. We need to move very carefully. We need to start using, for example, LNG to power Africa. It is needed. We need to use our hydrocarbons in Africa. The African Energy released the State of the African Energy Sector Outlook, and it says something. Before 2050, we will be 2 billion people in the continent. When you have a continent with 2 billion people, that means that there is already a big market in Africa for us to use our resources in Africa. So the market is going to be in Africa. So free markets, the market will drive production, it will drive usage, it will drive consumption, and that is what Africa is betting on. So we are going to be resilient. And I think between now, like what you talk about that conversation, we're going to knock on every door. We're going to go barrier to barrier, break by break, door by door, and engage in a conversation with Africa over the next 12 to 13 months before we get to Cape Town on October 31st to October 4th. We would have that conversation and change the way we use our energy and how the market is going to work. But we will do that with inviting our American partners, we're inviting our European partners, our Russians, and our Chinese partners, because it all comes down to money. There is money in Africa. We are spending a lot of money on cell phones and anything and a lot of things. We should build that energy infrastructure that will be able to provide energy to Africans. And I think that with the right kind of policies and the right kind of commitment, we can make energy poverty history and we can use Africa's natural resources to power Africa and grow Africa. And God bless the chamber, that the chamber is here and those beautiful people are there, they're working on this. But I don't want them to wait till the next African Energy Week. At the next African Energy Week in Cape Town, we should be announcing results because people are tired. They're waiting for results. Investors want to invest in African results. That is the message we got out of Cape Town. And I'm excited about this new journey. It makes me tired, makes me a little bit exhausted. But when I think about it and say we entrusted and called upon to do big things, this is our time and this is our time to make a difference. And we will do this.
NJ AYUK, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us this evening.